that pays a lot is like the be all and end all. And I was exactly the same. I remember like when I graduated university, I was like, right, I just want a job that pays me as much money as possible, and like that's my, that's my key to wealth. What I learned is that you don't get rich from your job. You don't get rich from your paycheck. It's what you do with that paycheck that actually helps you to build wealth. But so many people don't make that distinction, and they just think, I'm working, I'm earning a salary, I'm gonna save the money. That might keep you comfortable, but it's not gonna help you to be wealthy. So let me just start off a little bit about who I am. But before I do that, I want you guys to think about something. Are you satisfied with your current income if you're working? And if you're not working, what sort of income would you want to have? So have a think about those questions. Okay, so who am I? As mentioned, I'm Ayeesha Ofori. So what is my background? Very, very long time ago, I studied physics at Imperial College. So I'm much older than I look. I was speaking to someone outside and she was like, wow, black doesn't crack. So I am older than I look, but I studied physics. I then went into investment banking. I joined Morgan Stanley in IBD M&A, and that was wild. It was a really, really interesting place to be, working really hard, but also learning lots. After spending some years in IBD M&A, I then went to business school. I did a 2-year MBA at London Business School, and then they have a program with Columbia Business School in New York, so I lived in New York for a bit, which was insane. I found New York is like Disneyland for adults. It was amazing. And then after my MBA, I joined Goldman Sachs. I joined Goldman Sachs as an ultra-high net wealth advisor. So my role was to go and find clients and then to manage the money for them. So literally the richest people in the country. So if you think of the most high-profile people that you can think of, those were the types of clients whose money I was managing. So I would be making the investment decisions and deciding what I was going to invest in, basically on their behalf. And I say think of like the most high-profile people that you know, but actually, I say most of the clients we had, you've probably never even heard of, or you would walk past them actually in the street, because what I saw is that the incredibly wealthy people on a day-to-day basis, you wouldn't even know it. And that's something that's always stuck with me. So what do I do now? Now I run my own business. It's called Propel. It's an investment platform, and it's specifically focused on helping women to become more confident with their money, to invest, and to build wealth. And that was really important for me because when I was at Goldman, most of our clients were men. And what I found is that generally, like, even when I think about like the men in my life, like my husband, he has WhatsApp groups with his friends where they talk about money and like talking about different investments and things like this. And I remember thinking like, where are my girlfriends? Like, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we helping each other? And then I realized that something needed to be done for women, and so I decided to build it myself. So Propel is all about female financial empowerment. We help women through financial education, through community, running events, really sort of empowering you to be in control of your money and understand what to do with it, and then actually being able to invest. So we are the first female-focused investment platform in the UK. You can go on the platform, you can open investment accounts and actually put your money to work. But that is not why I'm here. I'm here to talk to you guys about your careers and about how you can essentially get as much as you can out of it. And not just money, it's also about being fulfilled as well, right? Because what I find is at a certain point, money often isn't enough. You might get to a certain point where if other things in your career aren't working right, you're like, you know what? This just isn't, it isn't even worth it. So although we are going to focus a lot on the money side today, I do want you guys to remember it's also about trying to find fulfillment as well. And I'm going to be sharing some tips and things that I learned through my career journey in terms of like how I made my career work for me. So starting off, the first thing that a lot of people sort of say to me is, okay, well, what sort of salary should I be asking for? What sort of salary should I be on? And one of the things that I find really interesting about a lot of corporates is that, and this may be different wherever you guys worked, but at a lot of the firms that I worked at, you weren't actually allowed to talk about your salaries. And it's very difficult to benchmark yourself and to know whether you're being fairly paid if you're not allowed to talk about it. I personally think they do it for that reason, because if you're not allowed to talk about it, then it's much harder for you to kind of fight for, say, more equality if you are being underpaid. So I'm going to be a little bit naughty, and I'm going to say to you, I think it is okay to talk to people about your salaries, but you need to be careful about who you are talking to. So I would have some very close friends that would work with me, and between us in our little circle, we would talk to each other and we would be open about kind of like what we were earning and, you know, what our expectations were in terms of promotions and things like this. We weren't having these conversations widely with everybody because you weren't technically supposed to be doing it, but I think it's actually really important to be able to benchmark yourself. So the first thing I'd say is ask around within your network, but make sure you're asking people that are your people. And not everyone will be your people, but you will know who your people are. You can also benchmark outside of your firm. So there are organizations and platforms that try to do that research for you. So some of them you'll see on the screen, like Glassdoor, LinkedIn, etc. They can also give you a sense of how much somebody at your level doing your sort of role should be earning. So that should give you a sense as well. But it's also about considering your sort of total value. Just because, you know, the role that you have might have a certain number attached to it doesn't necessarily mean that that should be the number that you should be getting. Maybe there are other things that you do in your workplace. Maybe there are other ways that you provide value. So really think about everything that you do within your organization. You know, there are extra clubs that you can run. You know, I used to do a lot of recruiting at both of the banks that I worked at. And I remember there would be, during recruiting season at the beginning, I would literally get a stack of CVs like this, and I would have to go through them all and then shortlist them and then do the interviews and things like this. Technically, I didn't get paid for that. That was sort of like me volunteering and being part of the team, but for me, that was another way that I added value beyond just doing my role. So it's really important to think about all the other things that you do as well. And then have a think about it. What is your total value? And one thing that I would say that we tend to do quite a lot is underestimate our worth and underestimate our value. So usually what I say to people, when you think of a number and you think of whatever that worth is or your value is, increase it. Because likely you would have lowballed yourself. Because that's oftentimes what we're inclined to do. Increase it, but don't make it totally unrealistic. You need to be able to back up and support, ideally with evidence, how you arrived at that number. And in a few slides, I'll talk a bit more about how you can do that. So as I said, your value is not just your skills, just doing your job. It is also your impact. What is the impact that you have, not just on your clients if you work in a client-facing role, but what is the impact on your company and your organization? How else are you adding value? Those things together is what I call your leverage. That is what you use to negotiate not just your starting salary, but any pay rises, any bonuses, anything like this. Okay, so now I want to look at how to negotiate. How do you have these difficult conversations? And I think for a lot of us, it can be quite intimidating, right? Particularly if you start at a new firm and if you're young, or even if the firm is just very culturally different. So I know from my own experience, in both places that I worked, I was one of very few black people. And in fact, at one of the firms, I was the only black person on the entire floor. And so for me, I did feel that I was different to everybody else. And I think that can also factor into your mind in terms of when you are having these conversations and things like this. So what I want to talk to you guys about is, how do you manage that? How do you negotiate? How do you put your best foot forward to make sure that you are getting what you're truly worth? So typically there are 3 times when it's a good idea to negotiate your salary. So before you accept a role, whenever you have like an annual performance review or however often your performance review comes, or if you've got an offer from another firm, then you can use that as leverage. But it's really important to know when those points are and to plan for them in advance. If you start planning at the time of your performance review, it is too late. If you start thinking about negotiating, after you've got the offer, and usually they give you, a limited time to respond to them, it is too late. You should be thinking about that as you're applying for jobs. What sorts of salaries do I want to be asking for? If they lowball me, what am I going to go back to them with? How am I going to do this? You need to plan all of these things in advance. So I'm going to sort of walk you guys through, I guess, some times in my journey and kind of how I did it. And I want to share my story, because when I look back in hindsight, I actually learned quite a lot. So I was at Goldman Sachs altogether for about 6 years. When I accepted the role, and it was even the same at Morgan Stanley actually after undergrad, the sort of person that I am, I just sort of worked hard. Like my whole life, like at school, do well in your exams, A-levels, do well, go to good university, do well. And I guess the way I was brought up is you do well, people see that you do well, you get compensated. In my experience, that is not how the corporate world works. And I would even go so far as to say, for some industries, I wouldn't call it a game, but there are rules. The sooner you learn the rules, the sooner you understand how the rules work and how to play them, the better. Unfortunately for me, I didn't realize there were rules until about 3 years in. Up until that point, I just kept my head down and I worked my ass off. So I would go in early, I would work late evenings, weekends, and I was like, they will see the hours that I'm putting in, they will see all the hard work that I'm doing, and I will be compensated. And then, the times would come where we'd have our reviews and we'd get paid, and I would speak to my little circle. And not only would I find out what my little circle were earning, but some of them had little circles with other people, so you could find out what other people were earning. And what shocked me, and maybe I shouldn't have been shocked, is that I was being paid towards the low end. And I didn't get it. I'm like, what more do they want? Like, I know my work is good. I've brought in more clients than this person, I do this and this. And I kept thinking, like, okay, I just need to work harder. But that wasn't the way to excel, not in this firm. And I'm not saying every firm is the same, but whatever company you're in, you need to understand how their system works. You need to learn the rules so that you can play the game. And so what I started to do was to speak to people and try to understand. And then when I started to see people at my level also being promoted, whereas I wasn't being promoted, I would ask, oh, why is so-and-so being promoted? What I learned is that you absolutely have to do your work and you have to do a good job, but that's kind of like the bare minimum. Everyone has to do that. What other people were then doing on top of that, which I didn't necessarily appreciate until I literally had someone explain it to me, is they were networking. They were networking with senior people. They were networking with decision makers. They were getting senior people in their corner. So those salary or compensation discussions where people are negotiating what you're going to be paid, they made sure they had someone in their corner in the room. It took me, as I said, a while to figure that out. Once I figured it out, I mean, give me a game, I love to win, so I figured out how to play the game. And I'll tell you guys exactly what I did. So I literally got a map of my team, my division, and then I mapped out all the other divisions all the way up to senior people. So I'm like, okay, who's my boss? Who's my boss's boss? Who's my boss's boss's boss? And how does this all play? And who are the decision makers? And who sits on the team that decides salary? Like, how does it all work? And I literally drew it all out, again, having discussions with people, and I figured out how it all worked. And so then I said, right, I don't have any mentors. At this point, I was just keeping my head down and working. I didn't have any mentors within the organization. I didn't have anyone senior who I could go to. I doubt any of them knew my name. So I said, right, I'm going to draw up a list of X number of senior people. And I gave myself a time frame, and I said, they are going to know who I am. I am going to reach out to them. I'm going to start networking. I'm going to start having these coffees. And I used to see people doing this. And I used to be like, ha ha, fool on them. Like, I'm here doing my work, and they're over there drinking, having coffee. No, I was the one not doing the right thing. So I started to make sure that I was having those coffee chats and that I was networking with the right people. It made a massive difference to not just how I felt about my position and my value within the organization, but when you start to get visibility by senior people, for me, it changed absolutely everything. But I had to be very deliberate about it and very strategic. And they had no idea I did that. So what I actually did was, there was a very senior person on my floor, and I literally just went up to him and I was like, you may have seen me around, we haven't really spoken, but I know some of the people on your team. I know you've been here quite a long time. I'm looking for someone to mentor me, and I wanted to ask if you would be that person. I'm willing to learn. I'm happy to do anything. He was so happy that someone acknowledged just how much he had done within the organization and that I had gone to him to ask him to mentor me. He said yes immediately. Now, what I didn't count on was that he was so keen, he started to give me extra work to do. But I was just like, oh my gosh. And he's like, oh, and I have 6 a.m. meetings with my team, you should join those. I was like, oh God, what have I done? So it came with some pros and cons, but I did it because A, I was genuinely learning new things. B, I now had a mentor, somebody who'd been in the organization. I think he'd been there for like 20 years. He knows how it works. And he was senior enough that I knew he can sway decisions. So 6 months before my next sort of comp season, when I'd be talking about my salary, I went to him and I said, okay, so actually in 6 months' time, this is going to happen, and I'm looking for a pay rise, and I'd actually like a promotion. How do we make that happen? So it wasn't how do I make it happen, it was literally how do we, you and I, make sure that I get that? And he was very open to it. And he actually sat me down and we discussed it and we talked about it. And we'd have regular check-ins. And he'd be like, have you spoken to so-and-so? You need to speak to that person. You need to speak to that person. It would have taken me ages to figure all of that out by myself. So it was really important that I found somebody who knew how the system worked, who could point me in the direction and who can guide me. And what he actually said to me was that I also needed to have a better relationship with my boss, which is what I did. So I had an okay relationship with him. I'd see that other people would talk to him about their weekends and things like this, and I used to think, oh, that's not appropriate. But actually, it was how they were bonding. So I'm like, okay, I need to bond with this guy. I need to find something that we have in common that we can talk about. And I'm like, okay, I'm black, he's white, he's older than me. At that time I didn't have kids, he did. So I'm like, well, it's not gonna be about this, it's not gonna be about this. I'm like, there has to be something that we can connect on. And I think it was something random, like I used to like flying, and so did he. So we ended up talking about planes and things like this, so random. But it didn't matter, that was our thing. And so whenever we'd bump into each other, we'd say something about that, and it helped us to actually build that rapport. Now, because my mentor had been prepping me for my negotiation period, before it got to that point, he said to me, make sure you actually speak to your manager about this as well. So this guy that we're now bonding over planes. So I remember I went into his office, and we're quite friendly by this point, which was a marked difference from how it was, say, 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I'd kind of walk past his office and just have a look and not say anything. This time, knocked on the door confidently, walked in. He's like, yeah, come in. And I said to him, I want to talk to you about my pay rise and the promotion that I'm getting. And he's like, okay. And I can see he's smiling because of what I said. And I said, well, last year, I didn't get promoted. These people who were the same level as me got promoted. I don't think that should have happened. I will let that go. It's in the past. There's nothing I can do about that. But the next promotion cycle, I'm going to be promoted and I'm going to get a pay rise, and let me tell you why. because I have done this, I've delivered this, I've brought this many clients, this many assets, I've done this, I've done the recruiting, I've done this. I listed everything out. But I had it because my mentor had helped me prepare it. So he said to me, he's gonna want to see these things. So I had it all and I was ready. And then he said, okay. And then I said to him, if there is anything missing from this list that you think will be important for me to get that pay rise and promotion, tell me now so that I can work on it over the next 6 months so that when I come back in here, we're all on the same page. Yeah? I was very clear. But I could have this kind of conversation with him because we'd built up that relationship. There is no way I would have been able to speak to him like that or have that relationship if I hadn't put the legwork in the beginning. And he said to me, your list sounds fine. I was like, amazing. I'm going to come back here in 6 months and we're going to celebrate together. Needless to say, I got promoted and I got my pay rise. So... So I just want to say a couple of things. I didn't get annoyed. No, that's not true. I was annoyed that I didn't get promoted. No, I was annoyed that I didn't get promoted when the others did, but I didn't let it kind of like suck me into some like dark hole and feel really bitter or whatever about it. I was like, just how do I fix it? And how do I fix it quickly? So sometimes, like, if you feel that your career isn't going where you want it to go or you're not getting paid what you should, it's very easy to get kind of sucked into like a negative kind of loop and cycle. I would urge you to try not to do that because very rarely does it end well. You're just likely gonna, either they're going to want you to leave or you're going to want to leave. But in my situation, it is possible to turn things like that around. Now, even if you're not in that situation, I think the key things I just want you guys to take away from that is you must have mentors. You need somebody who is at your level, but you also need somebody who is senior in your organizations who are going to bat for you. You need that. You cannot move up the ladder without it. Maybe you can get so far by yourself, but I've yet to see people really go far without that. I mean, people call it politics, that's what it is. Figure out the politics of your organization and learn how to play the game. Preparation is power, as I said. So whether you're going into a new employer and you need to find out all of the information that you need to about how to perform in the interview process, or, you know, how are you going to negotiate a better starting salary? You need to do all of that prep work, as I said before. At the point that you're going through the interview, or at the point you get the offer is too late. You need to do all of that work up front beforehand. Typically, when it's a new employer, let them give you that starting salary first. That's what a lot of people say. There have been some cases where I've actually done the opposite and I've given the number first. And the reason I do that is because in negotiations, generally the first person who sets the number sets the anchor. So if you go into something and they give you the number first and they say, I don't know, 50K, if you were thinking 70K, it makes it much harder for you to say 70 because it's quite far from 50. Whereas if you go in and you say 70, then they're not going to want to say they're 50 either. The only thing I would say you need to be really careful about there is not going too high, because if you're so high that it's just crazy, they may actually just think, what on earth? Okay, so you do need to be realistic about things. And the way that I think you can position it is say, well, you know, it really depends on a certain number of factors, but this is the range I was considering. So you don't even necessarily need to give one number, you can give a range. But once you have the offer, the power lies with you because they've told you they want you. They've given you the offer. They want you to come and work there. Now, if it's an existing employer, I think just like with the example that I gave you in my own situation, it's about knowing the value that you have brought. So I would keep track of every single thing I did. I know how many clients I've brought in. I know how much money I've made for them. I know how much money I've made for the firm. I know all the extracurricular activities that I'm doing. And also, I made sure that some of the extracurricular activities I was doing were useful to my team. So there were some things that I would do that my boss would come over to me and be like, oh my gosh, I heard you went to so-and-so. Thank you so much. It makes me look good. Oh, that's the other thing. If you can make your boss look good, you should absolutely try to do that. They really, really will appreciate it and they will remember it. I think other things that you can do is just collect feedback from colleagues, managers, and things like this, because a lot of firms have reviews, or 360 reviews, I think sometimes they're called, where lots of different people will contribute to your performance review, which ultimately affects your pay. So if you have a say on who goes on that review list, then amazing. You clearly pick the people that you have the best relationships with. Like, that's a no-brainer. But in some cases, you don't get to choose who reviews you, in which case you need to try and think about who might be reviewing you, and just make sure that, you know, again, well in advance, if there are any things that you need to smooth over, you need to smooth over. That's what those regular coffee chats are for. Making sure that the people who will have a say in terms of how much you were paid and where your career goes, that you're all on the same page. Ultimately, you want it to be impossible for them to say no to giving you that pay rise or giving you that promotion. So if you think back to the example I gave you with my boss, I literally listed everything out and then I said, is there anything missing that you would need to promote me? Tell me now so I can make sure I've done it. But then that means when I come back to you in 6 months' time, you can't tell me there's something else because we had this conversation. I made it impossible almost for him to be able to backtrack. So what are some strategies for negotiating? Prepare, benchmark, let them know what's coming. You don't have to do it as directly as I did. A lot of people tell me I am quite direct and I am quite blunt. It doesn't work with everybody. So what I will say to you is use your natural style. However you naturally are, like, don't try to be somebody else. Use your natural style, but also just bearing in mind the style of the other person as well. You know, if you're not a direct person, but your boss is, he probably would want you to be just to the point, straight, etc. Sometimes people aren't like that and they want it a bit more softly. You need to think about who you're speaking to and also adjust the conversation appropriately. Using silence as a tool. Sometimes people are in like really important conversations and just talk endlessly because they're nervous. You can pause and it's actually okay. People don't even notice. You think the pause is long, but actually pauses are really powerful. And when you pause and you're not saying anything, it makes the person think, oh my gosh, they're not speaking. What should I be doing? So sometimes the silence is really powerful as well. And you can even plan that out. Right, I'm gonna say this bit, I'm gonna say this bit, and I'm gonna pause for a bit, and I'm not gonna say anything. And then I'm gonna start speaking again. Plan out as much of it as you can. Have a sample script if you like. Clearly don't bring the script in, you're not gonna read from a script, but you can practice so that you know what you're gonna say, so that you can walk into that room with confidence. The other thing I would say is do things that make you feel confident, whatever they are. So for me, if I'm nervous or I have an important meeting, I power dress. So I will wear red, orange, or yellow, and I will be in heels. And people who know me, if they see what I'm wearing, they'll be like, oh, important meeting today. Literally just based on what I'm wearing. But it fills me with confidence, and I feel like, yes, I can do this. It's called power dressing. There's actually a whole psychology behind it. So again, I can't remember exactly what I did in that meeting, but I'm pretty sure I was wearing red, orange, or yellow. And killer heels, because that was my thing. Afterwards, be patient. Wait for a response, don't rush. If they come back with an answer or a response that wasn't what you were expecting, that's okay. If you've done this early, there should still be time to try and rectify things. But in that situation, what I would do is go to my mentor and say, hey, well, I had this discussion with my boss. This happened. What do you think? You know this person better, or you know the firm better, or in your experience, because you've been here for 25 years and I've only been here for 3 years, what do you think I should do? You don't have to go through all of this on your own. If you've invested the time in building a relationship with somebody senior and finding that mentor, they are there for you. So as I said, you know, when I went to him initially, like, how are we going to get me promoted? It really is a we. And just try not to be nervous. And I know that's easier said than done, but most of us, I think, should know what our sort of nervous tells are. So like, if I'm super nervous, my hands shake. If I'm really nervous sometimes, like I'll start sweating on my face or things like this. You can prepare for these things. So if I was going to a meeting like that, there's like things I would put under my makeup to make sure that I don't sweat because I know I'm going to sweat in my face. I will make sure that I keep my hands below the table so he can't see that they're shaking. Think about what your nervous tells are and see how you can try to mask them during the meeting. And that also makes me feel better because I'm like, oh, he doesn't even know I'm nervous because he can't see. Only I know I'm nervous, so it's fine. And that actually helps you be more confident and just have a bit more control. But nerves are natural, nerves are normal. We're not going to get rid of them, but we can control them. And then also, we have to get over this whole, like, I can't ask for money. Or like talking about money it's not what we do. We absolutely should be doing it. We should be doing more of it. And I don't know, like, think of a time where you've had something happen to you and it's felt really unfair. Like, think about how you felt. Like, that is how you should be feeling if you think that you're not being paid what you deserve. So when you go in there and you're not asking, you're not begging, you're showing them how valuable you are and you're making them see the value. So it should be a point where actually they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, we need to keep her, we need to give her the money. Now, it doesn't always work out like that. And I think to some extent, companies will pay you as much as they think they need to pay you to keep you. So it's a bit of give and take, but clearly you want to get the best possible value for yourself. But even when I got my pay rise and my promotion at Goldman, I was quite happy with it. But at some point, I chose to leave and I resigned. It was actually very difficult to resign. I carried my resignation letter around for weeks just because after all the effort and energy I'd put into building those relationships and things, it actually felt like a family. And so it was really hard for me to leave because I was sort of like, oh my God, it's like leaving my family. Like, you don't do that. But it was important for me to leave, so eventually I did do it. So the same guy that I'd had that negotiation discussion with about my pay rise, by this point, we're pretty close. So I literally go in and I chuck the resignation letter on his desk and I run out and he's like, what's this? I'm like, you need to read it without me because I know what you're gonna do. You're gonna try and persuade me to stay. It has taken me weeks to be able to put this on your desk. I'll come and see you tomorrow. And I went to see him tomorrow and he said to me, what do you want? I was like, what do you mean? I'm leaving. He's like, oh, just tell me. You want more money? You want some time off? And I was like, well, I won't tell you the word I said because I'm on stage. I won't say that word. But I was like, this guy, he's willing to offer me more money. Well, why didn't he give me more money before? Now that I'm here to tell you I'm out, now is the time when you want to be like, what do you want? And I'm willing to give you all of these things. So it also showed me that clearly the amount I got wasn't high enough because he was willing to give me more. But also, again, like, as I said, they pay you enough to try to keep you. Because I was trying to go, they wanted to pay me more to keep me. But I had already decided for lots of different reasons that it was the right time for me to go. But what I'm saying is just remember your value. And also, it's important to show it to them as well. And if they see it, they will want to keep you. And it is not a bad thing to ask for your value for what you are worth. We should absolutely be doing it. It's about changing the narrative. I'm not asking for too much. It's a fair reflection of what your value is. Okay, so now that we've talked about like how you guys can get, salaries and things like this, I want to very quickly talk about how you make your money work hard for you. So many people sit in cash, save or spend. But the key to it all is investing, in my opinion. We live longer these days. We are going to be more reliant on our pensions. For most of us, workplace pensions won't be enough. Government pensions aren't enough. If you do not invest for yourself, there is no one to save you. The UK government pension is £11,000 a year. What is that going to do for you? It is up to you to make sure that you are prepared for your financial future. Now, the reason investing works is because of compounding. The longer you invest, the more you're likely to accumulate over time. And you can see that in this chart. The lines get steeper the older you get, so the longer that you invest for. The earlier you start, the more opportunity you have to make more. In this situation, in the blue line, Jack starts investing but only invests for 10 years. Jill invests for 30 years, but Jack still ends up with more money than her because he started investing sooner. So even if you feel that you're not earning a lot and your salary is small, you can open an investment account with £1. You can invest £10 a month, £100 a month, whatever you can afford. And you might think that, oh my gosh, it's such a small sum. It's not going to make a difference to my life. Look at the compounding. Look at how those graphs really go up over time. Small amounts, consistently, steady, and often, that's what it's about. And if you can increase any investment amounts you're making, then do, because that also makes the difference as well. I'm always asked, where do I start when it comes to investing? What should I be doing with my money? I say to people, tax-efficient investing. So ISAs, I don't know if any of you have heard of ISAs or things like that. It's a great place to start because you don't have to pay any tax on anything that you make. So whenever people say to me, I don't know where to start, this is where I point them to. You can invest up to £20,000 every single tax year. Any profits you make are tax-free. You get to keep all of the money. You can open an ISA with £1. You can open an ISA with Propel. You can open an ISA with any other investment platform out there. It's about finding the one that resonates and works for you. Now, the other thing people say to me is, investing is so risky. Oh my gosh, I'm going to lose all my money. Yes, investing is risky. Holding cash is risky. Inflation is eating your money. But how you invest matters. You can significantly reduce your risk. If you invest for longer periods of time, you can reduce your risk. And that's what this chart shows. Somebody who invests in the S&P 500 for 1 month has a 38% chance of losing money. If you invest in that exact same thing for 10 years, it drops to 5%. 15 years, 0.2%. This is the same investment. The only thing that has changed here is time. So I say to people, when you're thinking about investing, diversify. Invest in different things so you don't have all your eggs in one basket, and invest for the long term because you significantly reduce your risk. So how do you get started today? Research, decide what platform you're going to use, pick suitable investments, find a community. You don't have to do this alone. Like, investing doesn't have to be something that's like, oh my God, how do I do this? I'm the only one doing this. Talk to people. Remember that WhatsApp chat I said my husband has with his friends. Talk to your friends. Ask them what they're doing. If they're not doing anything, you can start together. There are platforms out there that have communities built in them. Propel has it. Other platforms has it. Find what works for you. And I think that is it. So we've come to the end. So I will be taking questions. If you've liked what I had to say, if you're interested more in investing, I'm actually running a free webinar on the 25th of September about some of the investment strategies that the wealthy use to build generational wealth. So if you're interested in that free webinar, QR code is on the screen. Would love to see some of you there. Otherwise, happy to take questions.
Please. Check. Awesome. Thank you so much for that conversation. You had them glued. They were taking pictures. Someone's taking notes like they were doing homework. It was mad. Please take a picture of this in the next 5 seconds because we're going to change the slide so that you can add your questions to Slido. So I'm going to 5, 4, 3, 2.
Oh, you're in the way.
I'm in the way. Imagine that. I just told you to do something. I'm in the way. Hoi. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Do you want to do the next slide?
Yep.
Or the previous slide, your first slide?
Which one?
Awesome. So while we get the slide all up for you to add your amazing questions. Oh. Awesome. Please scan that QR code for you to add your questions. And while that's happening, Ayesha, I have a question for you.
Sure.
You talked about a lot of things. I love the negotiation chat. Made people feel uncomfortable. Also excited. I was just like, what's she going to say to this guy when she's leaving? Oh. But I have a question. So it's an interesting time in today's corporate world because when it comes to making money with a job, it seems to be that the most efficient way that some people tend to use is job hop, right? Mm-hmm. Even if you stay in the same level, so long as you job hop, you're going to have an increase in your salary. Yep. There are other arguments saying, no, actually stay in the same company and rise in the levels and negotiate internally, and that will raise your level as well as your money. How would you say, as we're talking about how to grow your money as a corporate individual, especially when it comes to that mid-level, how does one both take care of their career and their financial situation?
Yeah, so I would say it depends on the relationship you have at the firm. If you have got yourself to a position where you have somebody senior who has your back, and you've got good relationships with various people, then I'd say consider staying. Consider staying and moving up that corporate ladder, because the senior people support you, and you can have those conversations with them to make sure that you're getting paid. And I have friends who've done this. I have friends who have stayed in banking for like 15 years, 20 years, because there is somebody very senior that they're very close to, so they're paid well and their lives are good. If you don't have that, then it can often make sense to move to a new firm. And every time you move, the idea is that you get an increase of salary. And you might think about doing this, I'd say, definitely no less than 3 years. Anything less than 3 years just looks like you've moved around too much. Ideally, at the 3-year mark, you could consider looking for something else. And then every time you do look for something else, the aim is to get a promotion and also a pay rise. Moving laterally, so staying at the same position and the same role, isn't a flex unless you're just trying to get away from something. But the idea is you should always be leveling up when you move. If you can't find that situation or get it right within the firm where you've got the right people to push you up the ladder. And just to be very frank, I think it's very difficult to climb a corporate ladder to the top without having that support work of people pushing and pulling you. So if you think you're just going to go there and just work really hard, I just haven't seen that happen.
Great. Hi, Ayeesha. We have a few questions and the internet has gone and it's back. Okay, cool. With regards to mentorship, you spoke about finding a mentor within the organization. How do you go about this when you're looking for a mentor externally?
Yeah, so I think looking for a mentor externally also has its benefits, right? But that person isn't going to know the organization as well as somebody internally. So in an ideal world, you get both. Because the mentor in your firm will know how the firm works and be able to position you and point you in the right direction. Whereas the mentor externally, you can talk about all the things that you wouldn't say to the person that actually works there. So how do you find that external person? Through networking. I say also through LinkedIn. I know that I've had so many people reach out to me on LinkedIn. I personally don't have the time to do it, but I do point people in the right direction. Why don't you reach out to so-and-so, or why don't you reach out to so-and-so? But do your homework first. Make sure you're actually going to somebody who you think can add value to you, and try to see if there's something that you can give back to them. Don't just message people or reach out to them and be like, hey, hi, can you mentor me? That doesn't work. Again, it's about trying to build a relationship, trying to get to know the people. I don't know, maybe they're going to be speaking at an event. Go to the event, try and catch them afterwards. Put in that effort and that legwork. I have some mentees, they're not in the professional sphere. They're actually now all social media influencers, which is strange. But I first met some of them when they were in corporates, and then have just every so often they'll reach out to me and say, oh, I'm at this point in my life, et cetera, et cetera. And in those cases, we never even really had a formal conversation about me mentoring them. They met me at some of my events, we started speaking, we kept in touch, and whenever they needed to, they would message me, and I'm happy to give them my advice. So sometimes you can make it very formal, but sometimes it doesn't even have to have the label.
The last question is on negotiating, and more so when there's a negative outcome. So either if you get a no, or if you're told that you're already at the top of the band, so you can't really go further than that without a promotion. How do you go about it?
So if I'm told a no, I would politely ask why. What am I missing? Or what do you think I could have done for it to have been a yes? And then say, so at the next cycle, if I were to do X, Y, and Z, would it then be a yes? And then let's say they say yes, fantastic. If they say no, you also need to do A, B, and C. Then I go back to my desk and then I email them. Thank you so much for the conversation. You were so helpful. It was really insightful that you said to me that if I was to do A, B, C, and D, then this would meet the criteria for me to be promoted in X period. have a trail. Because then you can go back to the person and say, oh, but when we spoke last year, you said blah, 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 blah. For me, that's always helped, just making things a bit more formalized without actually making it too formal. I send follow-up chats summarizing what happened, like as normal in so many aspects of my life, because it means everybody is on the same page and everybody understands where they are. If you're told that you're at the top of the band, try and find out if you really are at the top of the band, because I find they like to tell you that a lot. And because you're not supposed to talk about your salary, then how would you really know if you're at the top of the band or not? So it's a way of trying to shut you down without giving you the opportunity to do something about it. So I would try to figure out if I really am at the top of the band and then say, what's the next band? Because I'm not the CEO. So there has to be another band that I can go to. How do I get there?
Awesome. Thank you. Round of applause for Ayesha.
Thank you, guys.
Ayesha. Yes.